Recently, mental health has been recognized with greater importance in the United States, and for good reason. It is estimated that 70% of adults in the United States have experienced a traumatic event in their lives at least once, and up to 20% of those people develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Trauma is common, unfortunately, and intervention can make the difference. Crisis intervention counselors are those working tirelessly behind the scenes of crises ranging from a personal level to a national disaster. What is a crisis intervention counselor, though? They are a trained mental health professional who provides support to anyone in distress. The people they assist may be undergoing a current crisis or trauma, or possibly facing PTSD from long-term trauma. They may also provide support to a family. What exactly constitutes trauma or distressing events? According to an article by the American Counseling Association Knowledge Center, all sudden interruptions or stressful life events are synonymous with a psychological crisis. Crisis is an individual's perception of instability or intolerability that has exceeded a person's coping capacity. When someone is faced with an event so life-changing that they are unable to process, this is when a crisis counselor is able to step in and help. Crisis counselors often provide support after terror attacks and natural disasters to help people deal with the emotional fallout from such devastating events. Early mental health interventions are important to avoid long-term damage. Crisis counselors also often work with people suffering from PTSD, especially veterans. They play a vital role in helping them recover and return to normal life. When working with victims of sexual assault and domestic violence, crisis intervention counselors provide safety planning, support through the legal system, help with emotional processing, and referrals for resources. Some people can be overwhelmed by grief or loss, so it can constitute a crisis. This also includes divorce. Crisis intervention counselors work in a number of different settings. Some work on telephone crisis hotlines or online chat rooms, especially for people experiencing trauma. These may be used by people who prefer to remain anonymous but recognize they need to reach out for some assistance. Many victims of violent crime are often referred by police to counselors at crisis counseling centers. They may be trained in specific types of trauma or to deal with specific people like children. Crisis counselors that work in schools are going to be trained specifically to work with children. Crisis counselors that work with humanitarian aid organizations are the ones who are likely to be found on scene following natural disasters and may be working with families or groups. What types of services do crisis intervention counselors provide? They start with an initial assessment to determine if there are any immediate needs that need to be met or referrals that need to be made, such as medical attention in the case of someone who is suicidal or following a natural disaster. Sometimes all someone needs is a person to listen to them and validate their feelings. A crisis counselor can be that trusted person and guarantee that anything shared or talked about will be kept completely confidential. They can provide education in a number of ways. They can educate people on trauma and PTSD and how it affects the mind. They can provide coping skills for how to deal with future crises. They can also provide education on financial planning for those that may be struggling following a natural disaster or leaving a relationship due to domestic violence. A large part of the job is providing referrals. It is very important for a crisis intervention counselor to be aware of the resources available in their community. Many of the people needing crisis services also may need referrals for clothing, housing, psychiatric services, childcare, job training, food or medical care, or legal services. Crisis intervention counselors may need to serve as advocates for their clients for a period as the client may be unable to advocate for themselves, especially if they are in a state of shock following a specific crisis. They may need someone to help meet their immediate needs until they are able to process and advocate for themselves. This may include assisting them with applying for social services or explaining their needs to service providers. The ultimate goal of a crisis intervention counselor is to get the client to a healthy place where he or she is able to advocate for themselves and meet their own needs and be a functional member of their family and community. This includes referring them for continued assistance and treatment. Please find my sources on the following 2 slides.